You wake up at 6 a.m., have to be out of the house by 7. There's a 2-hour commute to Tokyo ahead of you. Maybe you'll catch some fitful sleep on the train. If you get a seat, that is. Otherwise, you're standing the whole way. It's technically a 9 to 5, but of course it's rude to leave right when your shift is officially up. So realistically, you've got to wait until some of your seniors start clocking out. 6 rolls around and that begins to occur, but one of them stops to talk to you as he's walking by and invites you to come drink with him and some of your other coworkers. Gotta ingratiate yourself with these guys. As the Japanese saying goes, if you want to work your way up the corporate ladder, you have to drink. Sure, you reply. 3 hours later, you make your way to the station a little tipsy, and pass out for part of your ride back home. It's past 11 now, and you just want to decompress for a little bit before falling asleep. Turn on the television, don't want to bother with the news. Good thing you've got a DVR with some recorded shows. And there. That's the answer to the question. What does this theoretical Japanese salary person put on in order to escape for a half hour? For some of them, it will be anime, and as you likely know and may even resent, for many anime, the setting will be a high school. Well, that's the answer to the question of why anime. The why of its most common choice of setting requires a bit more cultural context. For many in the West, graduation from high school is seen as the beginning of one's life, their moment of real liberation. Maybe you'll have gotten a car or a job in high school, but once you hit the magical age of 18 and become a full-fledged legal adult, that's when the fun begins. You might head off to college, although for many that's a place for drinking, partying, and sex at least as much as it is for learning. But either way, you're seeking to escape the constant presence of your parents. In Japan, graduating from school is in many ways the death of one's freedoms. That isn't to say that school is easy, of course. On the contrary, it is more rigorous and demanding than that of Western grade school in many instances. It is simply that once one is in the workforce, that fairly typical tight schedule that I outlined makes it clear how one is not exactly going to be enjoying much downtime. For many, high school or maybe college was the last opportunity they really had to get out, to socialize and form friendships with someone other than a coworker, to go invest themselves in a hobby or interest, to, as demanding as the academics are, take some time to goof off and enjoy themselves. Karoshi, overwork death. Beyond the stories of businesses putting up suicide netting to prevent those who elect to end their lives rather than continue working, there is this term, karoshi, to describe the phenomenon of people simply tipping over and dying from work-related stress. Heart attack, stroke, starvation diets, pick a combo of the above and you've got the likely causes of any given case of karoshi. Relative to these harsh realities, high school is a veritable haven, not only a place legitimately substantively better, but a place subject to idealization and fantasy beyond even the edge it has over adult life and reality. In his article, Transformation of Semantics in the History of Japanese Subcultures since 1992, Japanese sociologist and professor Miyadai Shinji references a conversation had with Hideaki Anno, who described his initial plans for Neon Genesis Evangelion to have been a post-Armageddon school drama. As this paper has a focus on the concept of Armageddon, Miyadai points to the interesting implication of that Armageddon being a prerequisite to establishing school as a paradise. His explanation of its necessity is that as we grow up, escaping into fantasies about the school life that could have been, those reflections on our school life and how we could have done better, enjoyed it more fully, become less and less feasible. What he terms the gravity of society begins to weigh down upon us, and we understand that going back to such an environment would be impossible. As such, a cataclysm is required to fundamentally reshape society into one in which that return would be made possible, in which we can finally live out those fantasies of an idyllic school life. As much as Evangelion railed against escapism, however, most of us know that it was ironically followed by a significant increase in escapism and escapist media, anime certainly included.
Are you riding his balloony pony?
With that, this gravity of society began to lessen, and we entered an era where Armageddon was no longer a prerequisite. The 1995 Tokyo subway sarin gas attacks by the doomsday cult Aum Shinrikyo dealt a massive blow to the Japanese psyche, and facilitated a radical shift in much of its culture. Essentially, the cult attempted to escape reality through Armageddon, by resetting reality. In the aftermath of these attacks, the viability of fiction as an escape became much greater. Miyadai observes that there emerged a consensus that it is rather dangerous for those crazy people to engage with reality. In addition to this weakening of the gravity of society, he also notes that this reality became lighter. By this, he is referring to the separation between the real world and that of fiction, of media, and the breakdown of that separation. We can look to a series such as Serial Experiments Lain, which came out right in the thick of this, only 3 years after Evangelion and the Alm attacks, and see that these were ideas being grappled with by artists of the time. He also brings up its relation to Hiroki Azuma's theory of database consumption, but I've displayed far too much pretension here already by quoting one academic. Back to the clickbait! What grounds these fictional fantasies of an idyllic school, these fictional ideas being referred to by Miyadai as secondary reality, is the near universal ties to primary reality, namely, all of our own experiences with having attended school. To bring this back to my description of the incredibly restrictive environment that is the Japanese workforce, high school is a place of comparatively limitless possibilities. This ideal school that could have been is just that, something that could have been, if only the right opportunities had been seized. The claims by some that high school is such a prolific setting just because everyone can relate to it are not wrong, but they are too limited in their scope, because it is not just the universality of its relatability as something that everyone has experienced, but the universality of its relatability as something upon which everyone can project their own fantasies of a place filled with friendships, romances, and a passionate investment in something, be it a specific club activity, or merely hanging out casually and goofing off. Why do we get relatively few anime about adults living adult lives? Because by and large adult life is terrible, and there are relatively few instances where people can perceive an ideal alternative in which it would not be. On a more practical level, we get so few of these anime because there are so few opportunities for things to happen in regular Japanese working life. People don't get to socialize by and large outside of these mandatory after-hours drinking sessions. No one is stumbling into club rooms, no one is running into someone and falling in love, and that's a larger issue than you might realize. A reasonable reply to this might be, no high schoolers are enrolling in magical academies, so it doesn't seem like the realistic feasibility of events are really restricting anime. However, it runs deeper than these situations being literally possible or impossible. What is associated with school is a wide range of branching possibilities, of worlds being open to you, whereas the idea of the adult workplace only invokes thoughts of restriction and regimentation. There are the basic internalized concepts of school and work as cultural ideas, and it is those things that are associated with them that inform the types of stories that are created and set within these institutions. This idea of institutions is also important to appreciating the series Kiznaiver, and lacking that cultural context is something that I believe made its ideas resonate less strongly with many Western viewers. Ultimately, I believe Kiznaiver to be about the rejection of the necessity for institutions to engender relationships between people, while encouraging people to go seek out and form those relationships of their own accord. We get an ensemble cast of characters whose various hang-ups have prevented them from forming relationships, or at least honest, open, and meaningful ones, brought together initially by this government initiative, but by the time that has run its course, they have largely been left with heartache and resentment towards each other. It is in reaching out after that point and working to become genuine friends, not comrades through circumstance, that they can begin to move past those hang-ups. And now truly joined together, they seek to win over the strongest proponent of the Kizna system, Sonozaki, who has become convinced that no meaningful connections can form and stay together without being forced to do so. That is high school. That is an institution that puts people together and allows those relationships to be maintained with those people being passive participants. In many ways, Sonozaki expresses the angst over the ability to maintain friendships once you've left school, and when doing so would now require some real work on your end. There are already some government initiatives that are taking this institutional approach, setting up what are essentially speed dating events between young people in order to encourage matchmaking. Didn't think the Kiznaiver parallel was strong enough? According to a Business Insider article on the subject, if the conversation gets too awkward, a marriage promotion committee will step in to smooth things over or move them along. Yeah, nothing sounds domineering about that. The basic idea of the Kizna system that seemed so silly, abstract, and lacking in real-world application to so many is something of legitimate concern and debate. It is the conflict between this approach of adding that same infrastructure that high school provides to engender the formation and maintenance of relationships, and a stance that asserts that people should simply go out and do that for themselves. The ideal of school hasn't just become a ubiquitous element in media, it's bleeding over into real-world government policy. That is the power that this ideal has. This was probably my most intensive project yet, and definitely one that I had a blast putting together, However, it's also one that I think will be a bit more limited in its appeal because of the somewhat more academic approach. If you know any of those people that it would appeal to, please share this around so that it can reach as many of them as possible. Thanks for watching, and a special thank you to the patrons who are helping me to launch this channel as something I can work towards building into a career. Goose especially for his boundless generosity. It all does go a long way.